The Galactic Defense Academy's training hall buzzed with the usual morning chaos. Cadets from 17 different species preparing for another day of combat drills. Elsa stood near the weapons rack, her slender fingers tracing the edge of a plasma blade as she watched the others with quiet fascination. She'd been at the academy for 3 standard months now, one of the few Zenthari selected for the prestigious program, and still, everything about this place felt overwhelming, especially the humans. Mason sat alone on a bench across the hall, methodically wrapping his knuckles with black tape. The human moved with an efficiency that bordered on mechanical, each motion precise and controlled. Elsa had noticed him before. Everyone had. He was impossible to ignore, not because of his size, though he was tall by human standards, but because of the way others gave him space. Even the Crevalians, who stood nearly 8 feet tall and could crush steel with their bare hands, kept their distance. "Don't stare at the Earthborn," her roommate Zira had warned her weeks ago. "Humans are unstable, battle-drunk. They'll smile at you one moment and tear through a battalion the next." But Elsa couldn't help her curiosity. Mason didn't seem unstable. He seemed lonely. The instructor's voice boomed across the hall announcing partner drills. Elsa's heart sank, plural, as her species possessed 2. She hated partner assignments. No one wanted to pair with a Zenthari. They were scholars, diplomats, navigators, not warriors. "Elsa!" The instructor's 6 eyes fixed on her. "You're with Mason." The hall went silent. Someone dropped a weapon, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. Mason looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers across the distance. He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement, then stood and walked toward the training mat. Elsa followed on unsteady legs, acutely aware of every whisper, every stare. Up close, Mason was even more intimidating. Not because he was threatening, his expression remained neutral, almost bored, but because of the mark. It started at his collarbone, visible above his training uniform, intricate lines of silver and red that seemed to pulse with their own light, snaking up his neck and disappearing into his hairline. She'd heard about human combat marks, ritualistic tattoos that cataloged their battles, but she'd never seen one this extensive. "Ready?" Mason asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Elsa nodded, raising her practice blade. Her hands trembled. They began slowly. Mason matched her pace, never pressing, never overwhelming. He moved like water, fluid and adaptable, and despite her nervousness, Elsa found herself actually enjoying the drill. He corrected her stance with patience, demonstrated techniques without condescension. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she didn't feel inadequate. Then it happened. During a grappling exercise, Elsa lost her balance. She reached out instinctively, her hand catching Mason's shoulder to steady herself. Her palm pressed directly against the combat mark, against the raised silver lines that traced his collarbone. The mark flared brilliant white. Mason froze. His eyes went wide, not with anger, but with something that looked like shock, or perhaps fear. The entire hall had stopped. Every cadet, every instructor stood motionless, staring at them. The silence was suffocating. "Oh, gods," someone whispered. "She touched his mark." "That's a binding oath," another voice hissed. "Doesn't she know? That's a binding oath." Elsa snatched her hand back as if burned. I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Everyone out!" The head instructor's command cracked through the air. "Now!" The cadets scrambled for the exits. Zira shot Elsa a look of pure horror before disappearing through the doorway. Within seconds, the hall was empty except for Elsa, Mason, and the head instructor, a grizzled Vorath warrior who'd seen 100 campaigns. "Cadet Mason," the instructor said carefully. "The mark accepted the touch. She didn't force it. You know what this means?" Mason's jaw tightened. He was still staring at Elsa, that unreadable expression on his face. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and rough. "I know what it means." Someone explain to me what just happened. Elsa's voice cracked with desperation. Please. The instructor sighed, a sound like grinding stone. Human combat marks aren't just decorations, Cadet Elsa. They're living records, encoded with nanites and neural pathways. When a human warrior allows someone to touch their mark, truly allows it without resistance, it creates a bond, a binding oath of protection and loyalty. But I didn't allow anything. I just stumbled. The mark knows the difference between aggression and accident, Mason said quietly. It only accepts touch from those the warrior trusts, or is willing to trust, consciously or not. He finally looked away from her, his hands clenching into fists. My mark accepted you. That means I just swore to protect you. With my life, if necessary. Elsa felt her blood turn cold. That's insane. I don't want that. I don't want anyone dying for me. Too late. Mason's laugh was bitter. Human biology doesn't really care what you want. The oath is made. I couldn't break it now even if I tried. He turned to the instructor. Permission to be dismissed, sir? Denied. Both of you sit. We need to discuss what happens next. What happened next was a week of medical evaluations, ethical reviews, and meetings with Academy officials who treated the situation like a diplomatic incident. Elsa learned more about human bonding rituals than she ever wanted to know. She learned that Mason had served in 3 separate war zones before joining the Academy, that his combat mark was a tapestry of survival and loss, that he'd lost his entire unit in the Rift campaign. She learned that he'd come to the Academy to escape, not to make connections, and now he was bound to her. I'm sorry, she told him one evening, finding him alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. I ruined everything for you. Mason glanced at her, then back at the viewport. You didn't ruin anything. You wanted to be left alone. Now you're stuck with me. The mark chose, he said simply. Maybe I needed to stop being alone. He paused, then added quietly, maybe you needed someone to trust too. Elsa stood beside him, looking out at the infinite darkness punctuated by distant lights. I don't understand humans, she admitted. Neither do we, most of the time. Despite everything, the chaos, the fear, the unwanted bond, Elsa found herself smiling. Well, Mason of Earth, if we're stuck together, we might as well make the best of it. He looked at her then. Really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, he smiled back. It was small, tentative, but genuine. Yeah, he said, we might as well. The combat mark on his shoulder pulsed once, a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat, and somehow Elsa knew everything would be all right.